James, over there. So I have a tendency to speak a little loud. I don't want to disrupt everybody in the back, but can you guys hear me relatively well? Cool. So thanks everybody for coming. This is our first event at VentureX. Obviously the firm that I represent is NorthStar Venture Partners. I'll get to a second, but we're somewhat behind your venture capital private equity group. And the talk we're giving today is a talk that I give relatively frequently in different co-working spaces, entrepreneurship centers, and it's really oriented and designed to simplify the process of what it takes to raise earlier stage venture capital. So I'm going to go ahead and just get into it. And James, can you just good. Explain about something there. So, like I said, just diving right in, we used to be a group called NGI Capital. We were angel investors, so we were cutting check sizes between $100,000 and $500,000 into young tech startups. We were primarily focused on SaaS-based businesses. Does everybody know what that is? Startup software as a service. We like the subscription model. We like the fact that there was massive growth and that venture capital as an industry was booming. So if we could get it at the earliest stages with entrepreneurs, we'd be able to ride that wave up. And all of the partners of our firm at NGI Capital had been founders, including myself, that had some exits under their belt. So we understood the space pretty well. Right now, we've gone from doing roughly 5 to 10 deals a year with the angel group that we had, and seeing probably about 100x a year, seeing about 500x a year, and doing anywhere between 20 and 50 transactions a year with our private equity piece now. So the way that we operate is pretty simple. We have a managed capital division where we have roughly $40 million right now that we have to work with, and that's primarily focused on buyouts. We don't do angel stuff anymore. That's kind of when we switched our name to NorthStar and realized that as founders ourselves, we actually wanted to have a lot more control than an angel investor has. Didn't want to deal with dilution anymore, so now we focus primarily on buying out companies that are roughly at the $5 million revenue range. We're doing roughly $2 million in EBITDA. We like profitable tech companies. And then we have these advisory services, which most private equity groups have, where we really focus, although we have a couple different things, including fundraising, which is what we're talking about today, focus on mergers and acquisitions and helping founders exit their companies earlier than they're normally able to on a venture capital trajectory. So if you're a founder that is at a Series B level, which I'll go through in a little bit, but if you get to a certain stage and you're like, you know what, I don't want to raise the venture money anymore, where I'm stuck raising every 6 to 9 months, that's where we kind of plug in with entrepreneurs including. So a couple of partners and companies we work with, we've sold companies to a few of the big groups out there that you can see. Some of the other ones are locals that we try to mix in there. So obviously it's me, my face is pretty red in that. It's all good. So yeah, so I'm just a free-time founder. I've been in this about a decade. I was lucky my first 2 companies I was able to sell. The first one, believe it or not, sold for more than the second one, which kind of drives me crazy until this day, but so is life. And then on my third one, it was the biggest startup I ever ran. It was a Bay Area venture capital startup, and I was pushed out by VC's kind of the typical San Francisco horror story. I'm not going to go into that, that's for another talk. That kind of motivated me when I said, you know, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a founder, to come back in and say, how can I innovate on the finance side? Because it's messed up how the venture capital community and how the finance community in general is destroying a lot of good companies and good entrepreneurs. And so our whole goal is to fix that system. So the talk I'm giving today is based on this book I wrote. I have a couple copies in the back if anybody's interested afterwards. If you find what I say even remotely interesting, I'd be more than happy to give you a copy for free. It's also based on a course that I have. James, you want to come over here? It's based on it's based on this course. So what I'm going to be talking about today, like I said at the beginning, that's kind of just some background on our firm. I'm going to be focused on the 9 steps that we go through with our clients, portfolio companies, when they're raising an additional round, which is a little bit more from my previous background at NGI, but also with our advisory clients. 9 very simple steps that you have to do if you want to raise up to $5 million venture capital. So just so that I get an understanding of the crowd who I'm talking to here, how many of you guys have raised money for your companies thus far outside capital? Okay. Is anybody currently raising money? Is anybody interested in raising money in the near future? Okay, good. Good. All right, thank you. Okay, so good. So that works out. This discussion is going to go good. So we're primarily focused on these 9 steps that we go through with all our clients that we have our portfolio companies go through. This is what we're going to be talking about roughly. So start with why you need this money. We're going to look at the true cost of capital, and raising this capital, budget that you should be working with, valuation of your company, which is something that everybody, especially if you're about WeWork recently, is curious about, how to perfect your pitch, your target list, who you should be reaching out to, how you should be reaching out to these investors, and then finally negotiating and closing around. And again, the focus here is we're not really going for rounds above $5 million. We're trying to stay within these early stage rounds, so especially if you're thinking about raising capital in the near future and you're under that $5 million threshold, these rules apply directly to that. So just setting the stage, obviously we're primarily targeted as a group, and this presentation is oriented towards technology startups and new companies that are raising capital. And so with that, let's just dive right in. So first and foremost, what we always tell our clients, and I was talking to a few of you before we actually started this today, we shoot ourselves in the foot all the time as a financial services group because we're actually relatively anti-venture capital and anti-raising outside capital if you can avoid it. That's for a couple of reasons. When you're starting up a business, there's a lot of this confusion in terms of what your actual startup costs are. A lot of people think you have to have the perfect brand, the perfect website, that you have to have all this marketing set up, that you have to have all these different pieces in place, these people that you have to hire. And that's true in certain businesses. And so we always ask our companies, when they're coming to us, they're saying, well, I can't start this without $10 million. We're like, well, that's not really true. You can technically start it, and you can probably find a couple clients. It just not might be the ideal situation. So with that, we always tell our clients that think of three things. Is the money that you're thinking you need to raise for your business, is it actually startup capital, or can you get going with that? And can you do the bare minimum, and for those of you that know tech out there, can you build that MVP bootstrap? Can you build it with the money that you already have? For growth reasons, are you raising capital because your company is 2 or 3 years in and it's truly for growth, or is it more because you want to test different things? If you want to test, that's not a good enough reason to raise capital because the growth capital needs to be for scale. And then really the question that we're getting at here with this whole situation is, can you do that? Right? If you can do without it, if you can sit there and you can say to yourself, okay, well, we can actually grow this business at a nice, healthy rate in most situations, especially with where we are in the tech environment today, with companies that are extremely overvalued, that are imploding the minute that they IPO, with the horror stories that you're hearing about startups where the founders are getting pushed out of their companies, you can avoid a lot of those headaches, which we'll talk about in a little bit, if you can avoid that happen. So this talk will be pointless if we stop here, because sometimes you go through these things, and then you say, you know what, I do have legitimate reasons for raising capital. So as long as we're there, we then receive. So as long as we're there, we then proceed into understanding the true cost of capital, right? So there was nobody that raised it, right? Those people that are interested in raising? Does everybody understand the difference on a rough level if you're going to raise between equity and debt? Right? Relatively straightforward. Equity, you're going to be giving away a percentage of the company. Debt, you're going to be paying something back over a period of time. We're not going to talk about that today. As long as you understand the basic concept of equity and debt, you have to understand the true cost of what these things mean. Equity, there's almost always this connotation of, especially a tech entrepreneur as well, I want to sell 20% of my company at an $8 million valuation, we're going to raise X amount of dollars. What they don't factor into is who they're raising money for. They don't factor into how much of a pain in the ass is this person going to be. Is this venture capitalist going to be breathing down my neck? Are they going to take me away from the core of my business? Because at the end of the day, when we're raising from equity partners, these are money people. People on our side of the table, we tell people all the time, it's very cold. It's a very cold, hard money process. Where when we're looking at deals, and even if we're boring people and we're trying to get you on our side of the table and make a deal with you, it's cold and we focus on metrics. So when you're dealing with people like that, what does that mean? Well, you're bringing on human beings that fundamentally have their own ideas of where your business should go. Worst part yet, people like us have terrible egos. Okay? Like finance people, we fight with each other over egos. We're terrible, terrible people. And if you bring us on, you're going to have to deal with that. It's an absolute pain in the ass for the entrepreneurs that have a clear vision of where they want to go. On top of that, imagine that starts to happen. When you tell most of our founders that we work with, you have a roughly 12 to 18 month honeymoon period. Right? I guess in life and in business that exists, but regardless, you have this honeymoon period where you guys will love each other. The founders love the investors love the founders, and then all of a sudden one little thing starts to happen. And then they want to change something, you want to go a different way. Before you know it, you're on two divergent paths, and you have all these arguments internally where the founders are now dealing with all this extra emotional stress that they don't have to be dealing with, because as you guys know, it's damn hard enough to build a company from day one anyway. So we always try to remind our founders, again, these first 2 slides are a little more of the scary stuff, but think of the true cost of equity before you get trigger happy but just saying I want to raise as much capital as I can. Debt, obviously, it's a little bit different. We've actually pushed a lot of founders to going for debt. I was talking with a few of you that have some startups that have been around already for 2-3 years. We have some cash flow, we have some customers. In a situation like that, if you need true growth capital, we've pushed plenty of startups into just raising debt because they have a structured payment that they can then handle and that they can service as opposed to dealing with any of that human being or emotional stress. And then, of course, one of our favorite is alternative financing. So if you can focus on funding your entire operation, sales or factory or purchase orders, for example, if you want to fund your company for growth, and you say, no, we want to grow, we want to expand into China, if you can get a purchase order out of China, for example, then you can factor and you get some money. That's a great way to avoid. You can get potentially $1 million up front, and you can avoid both equity and debt and negatives. So with that, as long as we're still, after that, not scared about raising capital, we say, okay, we pass all the tests, we still want to raise, then we get into the key piece, which is how much am I raising? Right? At the end of the day, this is, I think, the number one thing that people ask is, well, how do I know how much I need to raise? Does anybody have a number right now for what they think they need to raise in the future, roughly? Has anybody thought about it? Does anybody have a process? No, right? It's pretty similar to valuations, which we'll talk about in a second. It's kind of like this thought process, well, this company raised 1.2 million, so we're going to raise 1.2 million. There's a lot of that goes on, and then we're going to reverse engineer to justify why we should raise the 1.2 million. Our approach is that we go through and we say, okay, what's our current expenses today? Even if you're starting for day zero, put those expenses in. You put that into an Excel, very simple workbook, no real math or financial know-how here. Then you enter growth expenses. You say, okay, well, I want to grow, right? That's my whole point for raising money. When I raise this additional money, where's that money going? I want to hire a chief operating officer. I want to hire 3 engineers. I want to open a new office, right? You put those expenses into a separate tab. Now you can compare and contrast the expenses without, the expenses with. Then you take that, you take those two, add a separate tab, and now you add your revenue model, whatever you have, whether you're already making money, whether you just have projections, and you go through and you do the same thing. You make 2 sets. You make 1 set that accounts for those expenses and shows the growth of the current expenses, and then you make 1 set of revenue numbers that match the growth expenses. So if you're going to hire a chief of sales and you anticipate bringing in an extra $1 million of business, you add that into that work. And then finally, this piece, and this is my book, and I'm happy to email these slides to anybody. The simplest way to do this, you're doing this on a monthly basis, is then you're going to multiply that by what's known as a runway. You have roughly 12 to 18 months of runway at any given time your company does what your standard practice should be that you're raising. And then you have that cushion of anywhere between 20 and 40% for the unexpected expenses that might come up. So our formula is pretty simple. You put all that stuff together, you multiply your expenses by 12 or 18, and then you multiply by 1.2 or 1.4. Most founders, what they'll do is they'll take this number, take their expenses, they'll multiply by 12, and then they'll multiply by 1.2, and that's the lower end of a range of funding that they're raising. And then they'll take the higher numbers, and that's the higher end, and that's when you hear terms like a round has been oversubscribed, meaning let's say right in between here you're at $750,000 that you should be raising. The low end of that would be $500,000, the high end would be $1 million. So now you're raising anywhere from $500 to $1 million, but you're opening the round at $750,000. If you get $1 million, you're oversubscribed. If you get under $750,000, you're undersubscribed. And as a founder, you can close the round at any time as long as you have approval from the people that you're raising. So, a little complex, but pretty straightforward if you follow the stuff just on that slide. So now your valuation. I think this is the number one thing that we have to combat entrepreneurs over, is the confusion behind how valuation is structured in the earliest stages. And remember, we're talking about early stage when you're raising up to $5 million. We're not talking about when your company has more than that. We're not talking about when you're a Series B company. We're not talking about when your revenues are healthy. We're talking about when you're raising this first round of capital, how do you price it? Well, the truth of the matter is the valuation is bullshit. I mean, we've all seen it. The valuation means nothing. We see companies that are probably 10 times worse than our companies raise 5 times as much as our company was able to raise. Why? Oh, their founder was a Stanford Google alum, or whatever it is. There's all these bullshit reasons why certain companies are worth more and get more money at a better rate. It's absolutely asinine. So on one hand, we always start out by saying, well, the valuation in the earliest stages is bullshit. It means nothing. And if you focus too much on getting that perfect valuation, you're going to get stuck in this, what do you call that, paralysis by over-analysis kind of standpoint, where you never actually raise the capital because you're like, oh, well, this company raised this much money, and I'm comparing to this company, and oh, wait, let's go back into the math, and before you know it, it's been 3.5 months, you could have already raised the capital. So the truth of the matter is where does the valuation come from? Well, you look at your rough money, you look at where you're at from your rough budget, if you will, start from the last slide, you say, okay, we need to raise roughly X amount of dollars. You look at some competitors that have raised some money. You put in some of the intangibles, meaning like, am I a founder that has 2 exits? Am I a founder that has no exits? Do I have relationships? Do I have not? And you set a rough range, but ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to negotiate that valuation with your first money coming. And that's a really important thing that most entrepreneurs have a tough time grasping, is that it's whatever the market determines your company to be worth when you actually open your round, that your valuation is going to settle. For as much as you want your company to be a $10 million pre-money valuation after being 2 years in, if the investors don't see it that way, if you pitch 200, 300, 400 investors, which those are the numbers that we're going to get into in a second, and they're saying, yeah, we'll give you the money, but it's going to be a $5 million valuation, you have to ask yourself, at what point do I lower that valuation to take that money in? The flip side to that is if you go out into the marketplace and all of a sudden you're getting flooded with offers left and right, your valuation might be a little low. So now you can be a jerk to the people on the other side of the table saying they're a jerk to you and be like, listen, we just had a founder that had 45 offers for his company. He was just going back and being like, originally his deal was $5 million for 20% of the company. He was able to get $5 million for 8% of the company. So if you can get those offers, you can play with that valuation. But remember, ultimately it's that first money that comes in that's going to determine what your valuation is. Okay, pitch deck. Pretty simple stuff. And for some reason, the 500 decks we see, 490 are on the target. For one reason or another. And it's mostly because they're overcomplicated. That's piece number one, is that from a content standpoint, when we're getting pitch decks as investors, when you're sending your pitch deck to the VCs, you have to remember, first of all, as much as I hate to say this, we don't give a shit about it. We don't care. At the end of the day, we're not looking at who the team is, we're not looking at who these people are, great, you have 3 degrees, but we really don't give a shit. Those are little pieces of information that we might need in due diligence. All we care about is we want to see, wait a minute, why is this a good investment? Because guess what? One thing that entrepreneurs forget is, well, we have bosses too. We have limited partners that we have to get a return for. So if we're promising a 20% year-over-year return to our investors, you need to tailor your pitch deck for me to show me how you're going to contribute to that 20% year-over-year return. And that's what we have such a tough time understanding why entrepreneurs don't grasp that piece. If you highlight the information that's important to your target, you would do that for a sales pitch, wouldn't you? If you're going out and you're selling to a hotel, let's say you're a hospitality tech company, and then you're selling to a restaurant, if you go to a hotel, you're not going to change your pitch a little bit to tailor to the restaurant as opposed to the hotel. You have to do the same thing with investors. You have to tailor the content so that there's stuff in there that we care about. Return on investment, how quickly you're growing, scale. Don't bore me with that 25 slides on technology. Right? And you guys are in healthcare, correct? Healthcare is a little bit of a different sector where if you have a super intensive, and I just want to put this as a caveat, if you have a super intensive like healthcare-oriented business or something that has to be FDA or the government defense technology or pretty deep, deep-learning technology, if the technology is crucial, put it in there, but try and find a way that we're not going to have to sit there and go to the Encyclopedia of Medicine to understand. Right? So I think that's pretty simple. A couple things on slides and time. If you're coming in to pitch us, the minute you open a deck, it's 23 slides or more. You guys are into memes. There's a great few lines in the financial community where if you see that the slide deck has 23 slides or more, you kind of just put your head down and start playing on your phone. So the average, what we like to see, most VCs and most firms that invest look for anywhere from 12 to 22 slides, and we want it basically 20 minutes max. You don't want to deal with having to listen to you for 20 minutes because by 10 minutes in, we probably have 5 or 6 questions. Your goal should be to get to Q&A as soon as possible. Why? Because fundraising is nothing more than a negotiation. Fundraising is nothing more than a game of chess. We've already established that the valuation is bullshit, which means that your only job is to negotiate. The only way you can negotiate is if you have a conversation with them. So if you're sitting there for an hour and you're pitching me with all this BS that I don't care about, that I don't know about, at the end of the day, how on earth am I going to have my time to ask questions if I gave you a 1-hour meeting? You have to get to the point where you're having a conversation, because then I'll ask you stuff that I need to know about, and if you don't know it, this is one really important piece when you get to the pitch phase, just say you don't know. We don't care if you don't know. Tell us you don't know. Tell us you'll look it up and get back to us. That makes for a much more productive meeting, and that's what we tend to tell our clients too, is like, if you want to get to a check, get to conversation. So, in terms of getting to a check, a big question that we get all the time is, well, I pitched 20 investors. None of them got back to me. We're like, well, you got to pump those numbers up first. Right? We see on average, for our companies that are raising capital, it takes between 200 to 300 pitches 200 to 300 pitches, okay? We're not saying pitches in person, but it could be pitches over the phone, it could be virtual pitches, whatever the hell it is, but it's between 200 and 300 of those before you start to get 2 or 3 investors that are actually interested. Right now, we're not talking about people, some of you guys might be serial founders, some of you guys might have unfair relationships, whatever it is. We're going to talk about it in a second, you're going to want to use those, but if you're just doing a raw outreach, if you have a brand new startup and you're going into a sector that you know nothing about, you have to really boost your numbers up to make sure that you're getting every possible investor to invest. Now, the caveat to that is that you have to qualify. Think about this. We're seeing roughly 500 decks a year. If you guys think we're going through every single deck, and put a fine-tooth comb, you're incredibly mistaken. We go through it, there's something in there, just like a resume, where if we say, okay, well, this qualifies the right way, you're into a file away bucket and pass it on to somebody else. You should be doing the same thing with your investors. If your investor, which you're going after, let's say you're raising $1 million. If your investor, when you're researching these people on databases like Crunchbase or PitchBook, anywhere you can find this information, and their average check size, meaning the check that they like to write, just like we used to write $100,000 to $500,000 targets, or $100,000 to $500,000 checks. If their average check size is $5 million, how many of you guys think they're going to touch $1 million check? Good, thank God. It's a good time for no hands to come up. So I mean, think about that, right? If their average check size is $5 million, and you're hitting them with this pitch, what are you doing? You're ultimately screwing yourself for a later round when you need the $5 million from that investor because they're like, hey, you know, excuse me guys, I'm from New York, like, hey, fuck you, you know, like, you already sent me this bullshit, like, why would we pay any different now? You know, they're not, you're kind of taking away their time. Remember, you're dealing with big egos, so you have to be respectful of the people that you're reaching out to, and that's why you always tell entrepreneurs to qualify them as much as they're qualifying you. We're qualifying you guys all day long, don't make a mistake, right? And this is the piece, too, that's very strange about the venture community today, and they've done it really well over the last 20 years. They've positioned themselves to where we as entrepreneurs, and now switching back to the founder side, have this strange, almost Stockholm Syndrome belief that they're the more important piece of the table. Right? They've done that. They've positioned themselves where, I have the money. You have to come to my office. Right? And they'll give you these bullshit meetings. They'll give you these bullshit breakfast meetings. Before you take those meetings, ask them. Say, look, how serious are you guys about investing? And what other investments have you made in the last 12 months that dictate or that indicate that you're going to invest in us? There's no shame in that. If anything, you're saving the bullshit $2,000 that I used to have to spend with my last company flying back and forth to this idiot San Francisco bullshit, you know? I mean, qualify them at the end of the day. And then finally, when you're qualifying, prioritize, right? This is just like an old school sales thing, which fundraising is negotiation and sales. When you're looking at your target list, how much you assemble, your 200 qualified leads, bucket them into 3 different sections. Your C grades, the ones that are least likely to convert. Those are your throwaway meetings. Practice on them, don't spend too much time on them, perfect your pitch. You're going to suck with the first 20 pitches. They're going to be terrible, but you're going to pick up pieces of information from the other side of the table. You're like, oh, that's what they care about. So use these idiots as your test round, right? Then with your B people, start to take those more seriously. With your B people, start to look at those guys and say, okay, well, these guys are a direct fit. They invested in somebody that is a good fit for us, 10 months ago, whatever. So you start to take those a little bit more seriously, and then you wait to reach out to the A's until you get that feedback from the B's, because the B's will tell you all this stuff you're doing wrong, and then you go straight to the A's, and you're like, hey, I have this go, and then that becomes your B, which we'll talk about in a second. This thing sucks. What's wrong with this thing? Have you been quick with this? No. So anyway, so now reaching out to your investors, right? We've gone through this whole thing where now we've gotten to the point where we have our pitch, we've put together our target list, we're ready to go. And now this is kind of where everybody freezes up again, where they're like, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to reach out to these people. Oh, it's unfair, you've been in this for a decade, so you know 50 people. And I'm like, it's no different for any entrepreneur. If you've been in it, if you've sold 2 companies, if you've been in 10 years, I still have to do this stuff when we're raising capital on our own, because I've never been on the finance side. This doesn't change. When you're reaching out to investors, there's a couple things to remember. It's that personal connections are always number 1, right? I mean, that's the obvious. You have to remember that if you have a personal connection, if you have an unfair advantage, to leverage it, but you can't rely on that. You have to really rely on that target list and making sure that your outreach is targeted, just like we were talking about before, the people that are actually going to convert. But a big piece, and probably the best kept secret in Silicon Valley, this happens all the time, this happens with any major startup that you've really ever heard about, is what's known as a sweetheart deal. Is anybody familiar with what it means to secure a lead investor? Okay, so when you secure a lead investor, let's go back to our example, raising $1 million. the likelihood that that first investor that I reach out to that's going to commit money, puts in $1 million, is probably 10% chance of that. They're probably going to say, I will give you, and this is how almost all fundraising goes, I will give you $250,000 contingent on the fact that you can find 3 other investors that are going to fill out the rest of the round. Why do they do that? Because investors are just as bad as high school kids. It's all a popularity contest to them. So they want to see that there's other investors involved because that gives them this false sense of confidence. Well, if Blackstone didn't work, right? If you use that methodology and that ideology, and you start to think like that, and you say, okay, well, my first investor is probably going to ask me for things like that, you're going to run into that with every investor you pitch. If they're the first money in, they're going to say, well, I'll give you this money, but who else is coming in? So the way to combat that is with a sweetheart deal. The first investor that you get is always the most valuable. So let's say you're raising this $1 million money. If you find somebody that's willing to give you $250,000, you can write your contracts in such a way, we'll talk about legal in a second, but you can write your contracts in such a way where you guarantee their money. You guarantee their money no matter what happens. And there's ways to do it so that it's not personally liable to you. There's ways that they like it. And oftentimes if you say, hey, we're got a sweetheart deal that know exactly what you're talking about, and they'll tell you what their terms are. This is for things like, let's say you're building a music app, okay? You're building a new Spotify. If you guys got Jay-Z or Beyonce to invest in, tell me you can give them whatever the fuck they want. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's like if you're starting a makeup company and Kylie Jenner comes after you, well, yeah, whatever the fuck she wants, she gets. That's a sweetheart. And you do that with the top tier investor that you can get for your A guys. So with your A guys, if you get Sequoia or Kleiner Perkins, one of the big names that are even remotely interested, try offering them a deal. Push this thing, it sucks. Try offering them a deal that's unfair to everybody else. Because then all of a sudden they see, whoa, greedy money hungry bastards on this side of the table. You offer something that can't lose, we're going to give you the deal. And then what you do is you use that name to raise the additional capital to fill out or oversubscribe the rest of the round, because now you have Jay-Z and Beyonce, who's not going to invest in that as Jay-Z and Beyonce, right? Okay, so now we're getting to the really nitty-gritty piece of the fundraising process, which is the actual negotiation of your term sheets. Term sheets, is that a familiar term to everybody, roughly? Okay, so I'm going to start down here with Learn. Like I said, I have a few, you got a copy of my book. You got a few, want to hold that up for a second? Yeah. So I got a few copies of that back there. If you guys want one and I don't have enough, I have more in my house, I can just bring more in, drop them off at the office. I have a whole glossary of all the terms that are going to come up when you're negotiating one of these deals, but there's 2 really good books. One is called Venture Deals, and one's called Mastering the VC Game. These are basically books that are designed to make you as smart or as up to date with everything that's going on the investor side of the table, so that when they're throwing bullshit finance terms, you're like, wait a minute, that really just means this, and you're not getting screwed like most entrepreneurs do with dumb terms because they don't know what they're looking at. So that's number one, is make sure that when you're negotiating, it's always good to take a step back and learn. If they slide a term sheet, if you're dealing with an investor that slides a term sheet from you, that slides a term sheet across the table to you, we're going to give you $250,000 for 5%, and they say you have to sign it in 24 hours, put your middle finger up and walk out. Not a chance in hell I'm signing that thing, because that's unfair pressure tactics that they're using on me, and that means that they're going to try and screw me down the line with some of the bullshit that these vulture capitalists do. So be aware of that. With that, legal. I mean, James will tell you, because he's the one that deals with the advisory clients mostly that come to us, the amount of fucked up situations that we see entrepreneurs get themselves into because they skipped on legal in their first 1 or 2 rounds. You have entrepreneurs that are literally giving anti-dilution rights to a 20% investor for $500,000. If you guys know what that means that some dumb schmuck that gave me $500,000 to start my business 5 years ago now has 20% of my company. When Johnson & Johnson or Disney or whoever is coming in to invest $10 million in my company, and they're saying, well, we need X amount of percentage, their 20% is not getting diluted. You're getting diluted down to 1% because these bastards took your anti-dilution rights. So if you're skipping on legal early on, because you're like, it's $300 an hour, it's going to cost me $2,000. It's a fool's move because it's going to cost you millions down the line. These are the horror stories that you see from San Francisco where people skimp on legal early on. And finally, with that, and your lawyer's going to tell you some bullshit little disclaimer on my lawyers, if it's legal advice, I'll sue you if you sue me. Negotiating. Everything is negotiable in any of these VC deals. Most of these investors, they're going to come to you, and we have these prepared too. If you guys want to come into our office to see what a term sheet looks like, happy to show you one. If we're in selling mode, I'm going to punch you and be like, listen, this is the deal, take it or leave it. Right? Because that's my move, that's my angle. I'm trying to get the best deal for my LPs. If you believe that just because that's the interaction that you had, that everything in there is non-negotiable, that there's certain pieces that are non-negotiable, it's bullshit. You've already lost. You can negotiate anything in what these people send you, and that's why the most important thing when it comes to fundraising, more than anything else we've talked about today, is to make sure you can secure multiple offers. And going back to our last point, the way you secure those multiple offers, offer that first person that sweetheart deal, offer that big, the Beyonce, Jay-Z, whatever celebrity investor, and I'm using those two for celebrities, but it could be JP Morgan for you guys, it could be something like Northwell Health or something like that to invest. If you get your big name investor, that sweetheart deal, you're guaranteed, almost always guaranteed to secure multiple offers and be able to negotiate everything. Finally, and this is where we're closing, and then we'll get to Q&A, but this is the number one most confusing, unbelievable commitment that I see entrepreneurs get into that still doesn't make sense. They spend the money before they have it. They spend the money before they have it. And this happens for some reason an inordinate amount of times in Florida. Florida's a very strange dynamic. We have such a great ecosystem in our startup. Okay, any Knights in here? Go Knights? Yeah, we got a lot of you said people good. Cool. UCF and the community in general has done a great job building the startup community. But our funding, if any of you have even talked to investors here, is so far behind. It's a lot of real estate investment, which is great, but they don't understand the pieces that go into technology investments and deals. So sometimes they'll get to a point where they shake your hand, they're like, oh, I'm in for $500,000. I'm in for $500,000, absolutely. Without having a term sheet and without having money cleared with their account, we see these entrepreneurs going and getting these crazy expensive offices. They start buying ridiculous things that they don't need. They start hiring 5, 10 people without the money ever clearing. Then 5, 6 months in, they're going, hey guys, I really need that money, I've already spent it. And they're like, oh, sorry, Rob, we didn't understand the terms. You don't have anything in this game until you have the money in your bank. And that's what I want to close on, and now happy to do this. So, sorry, recap. Without this damn thing, I don't know what the hell that. So just to recap, the 9 steps that we have. Number 1, ask yourself, ask your company, co-founders sit down, have a real serious powwow and say, why do I need this money? Legitimize it, make sure that it's actual capital that you need and not just capital that you want. Big difference between wanting a Gucci bag and needing a Gucci bag, right? Let's be honest. True cost of capital. Think about who you're raising from. Am I dealing with a bank? Am I dealing with an institution? Or am I dealing with some overly emotional, aggressive VC? If the relationship starts out bad, remember, you're in a marriage with these people after that. Once they're in your company, they're not coming out. So don't get involved with that partner on the equity side. Your fundraising budget. Fundraising budget, valuation, pitch, and target list. To bulk those together. If anybody's interested, we have templates for all those that are free. Happy to send you guys those if you want to take a look at them. So happy to after this. Then reach out to investors. Don't forget the numbers that you're going to have to reach out to. Make sure that you're hitting those numbers and qualifying those people. Negotiate your terms and that you don't have the money. Thanks, guys. That's it. Take over. That's all. Questions?
You mentioned that you had a book, sir. Where can I get that?
Oh, there should be a copy right there. Yeah, very much. Good question. Anybody else? Questions about anything specific? Anything about rounds? Anything about valuations? Anything you guys want me to clarify?
Random question, but Shark Tank, I'm sure everyone's seen it.
I'm not sure.
I know. I don't know why. You talk about like a time, and I know that show got people make decisions quickly, but you look at that seriously. On that, it's like, hey, I need to do right now to make a decision. Is that easy, or does that happen to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think it's in the name of the show, Shark Tank, right? I mean, it's a sharky kind of move. Is it a move that's used often? Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, we could sit here and do the same thing and say, well, look, we got the 40 million, we got nothing. You need $1 million to get into production. Like, the deal's done in 14 hours. And is it a tactic? Yeah, it's designed at its core, like the good reason why an investor would do that is that you don't go and get competing bids and screw me when I'm offering you a good deal.
Sure.
It's gotten to the point where venture capital has become so convoluted, and everybody and their grandmother now is a venture capitalist, that you're not necessarily doing that for the right reasons. You're just doing it because you're kind of sharking the investor and you're forcing them to plan your terms, as opposed to letting them see everything's out there.
Right.
So, I mean, our whole viewpoint on this is that if we have like an advisory client, they're like, hey, this investor's only have 48 hours to sign. We're like, yeah, rip it up and see what happens in 96 hours. Most of the time, the deal's not on the table. It's possible. You have to remember, too, like the thing with funds, for those of you, just to go a little bit we have a certain time period that we have to invest as capital. So if we raise a fund, if we raise a $40 million fresh fund next year, we have 10 years for that fund to make money, but we might have to invest all that money within the first year. Because the idea is that you're pumping up your deal flow. So we might have to invest $2 million per company in 20 companies before the end of the year. So if you think about that and you're reverse engineering and you're like, well, if they're trying to screw me, how can I screw them? Try and see who has, and there's ways to figure this stuff out. Pitch over by hiring for like hours. See how much money they have left in that fund. If they got $20 million at the end of December and you're going to pitch them like, fuck it, like, they kind of have to invest in you. Right? They don't have to use options. So.
Very cool. Yeah, kind of going on that topic, most of this, like I study financial stuff and trading.
You're way smarter than we are.
And I'll tell you,
We're just hack sales guys.
is there like a certain time of the year, is there like a season when these funds are kicking in?
Absolutely. Great question and perfect timing. This is the worst part of this. This is, and it's strange because we'll have a lot of founders that'll come to us too, like, remember we do shit from advisory stuff, they'll come to us and they're like, well, I tried raising, it was right around November, we're like, this is when, like, especially VCs, they get asked for these bastards are gone for the next 2 months. So when they get a fresh fund, or when they start their fiscal year, they're usually much more active after that kind of January 6th, January 8th threshold, when the holiday season's over, the Thanksgiving event. So we always tell people that are working with us, get all your stuff prepped out now. Get your pitch deck done now, get your C meetings out of the way, get all the BS done during this time frame, and then hit them hard in the first quarter. First 2 quarters are the best because we have fresh capital we haven't deployed. Third quarter is like when people, just like we were talking about before, maybe they hadn't been able to invest that money yet, so they start getting really aggro and aggressive, and you can potentially get a better deal, middle of third quarter, whatever. Fourth quarter, you're kind of quiet and done for the year, so it's a good time to be a pro and all that stuff. And of course, you kind of have to see the bylaws of the fund. Again, that goes into researching the investors. When is their fiscal year? Right? I mean, if you can chat with these investors, ask them these questions, you'll sound like a genius when you talk to them because nobody ever has the balls to ask them that. That's what it comes down to. So hopefully that helps. And of course, you have to build your momentum. The best time to do any kind of raise, and we'll do this stuff, is like if you can structure your own PR strategy to where you can get like an Orlando Sentinel story, you get a Wall Street Journal story, whatever, hit them right after that. Because like we said, it's a popularity contest. If they're investing in a group that's just in the Wall Street Journal, we're going to take that to all our little buddies at our little VC trading events, but so it's the Wall Street Journal, where that deal. I mean, it's honest, so that's another thing to remember. Manufacturing momentum or manufacturing momentum. Any other questions? Anything else I can clarify for anybody?
Now I got a ton, but I'll be here all night. So.
What's that?
I got a ton, but I'll be here all night.
You want to ask one? You want to throw one?
I mean, I started an internet company back in 2015. It didn't do so well because of lack of funding, and so I'm not experiencing any website developing things like that, and I got screwed by developers. But getting the money, like, do you know places like, for instance, for like website companies, where to go, things like that, how to set up the proposals, like all those questions. Like I have a lot, so I'm gonna like sit down with you and figure out, because if I can get the funding, then I'll bring back that internet company, back up.
I mean, anything like that, we're just right upstairs, by the way.
Yeah.
Just before, if anybody wants to pop in, anything, a question, if you want to email us, anything, Lindsay, all that.
Because I funded everything myself.
No, and that's the thing of, raising, what we talk about today is a little bit more venture-oriented
Right.
for tech companies and getting close to that 5 million mark, but there's a really beautiful piece of fundraising that we kind of left out, and that's what's in that book.
Okay.
Which is focused more on like the 500,000 under the space that we were in. If you can get in with a really what's known as an angel investor, which is typically someone who will cut a personal check of up to $500,000, these are usually people like myself or other people who band together that have exits. So we've built these companies before we've sold them. So if you can identify someone that's in your sector, what was the sector of the...
Coupons, like online, it's like somewhat similar to, what do you call it, Living Social, things like that?
We had a meeting with someone yesterday that's doing, it's basically like a discounts and savings program for the charity industry.
Correct.
Really smart guy, really cool dude. But he's already sold 3 companies. He's doing this for fun, and it's already a big company. So if you get someone like that sold 3 companies, you got to remember these people are personally wealthy, and they'll see something just because they understand the vertical. They're like, I like you, I like the deal, I'll come in. At that point, it's not necessarily all about the money, because you're still going to have to stretch it, and you're still going to be living on a pretty shoestring budget with an angel. But you're going to have someone that's been there before, and they're just going to open up the moment and be like, just build it here, or I already have this piece. That's the real secret to how these things are built, because bootstrapping them out of this stuff. I can give you a list of vendors. My vendors can still screw you.
Right,
Right? I mean, I
exactly.
have 10 years of my vendors, I love them, but they can still give you a much worse rate than my 30% discount.
Right, right.
So it's not necessarily always about, well, there's got to be some playbook, or there's got to be some this that I can do. It's sometimes just about building that team and finding that financier that's going to say, hey, I've done this before, let's do it together.
Yeah, okay.
You know?
Sounds good, thank
I
you.
think we've got 2 more minutes. If anyone, one more question, if not, we can drink some beers and hang out. So I'm going to take that as drink beers and hang out. So thank you guys.
Oh,
Love to see you.
yeah.